This is a customs declaration form, filed at the Port of Shanghai on January 28, 2026, at 2:15 p.m. local time. The form documents an attempted export shipment, 2.4 metric tons of gold bullion, refined to 99.99% purity, destined for Zurich via air freight. The shipper is a Swiss refiner with operations in mainland China. The recipient is their parent company's vault facility in Switzerland. Standard transaction, routine logistics. The kind of shipment that has occurred thousands of times over the past 2 decades, as gold flowed freely between China's refineries and global markets. The form is stamped in red, 2 characters. The translation is simple: denied. Below the stamp, a handwritten notation references State Council Directive 2026-14, issued at 6 a.m. Beijing time that same morning. The directive, not yet publicly announced when this shipment was blocked, contains 11 words that restructure the global gold market. Export of refined gold products is prohibited until further notice. China just banned gold exports, all of them, effective immediately. No exceptions, no waivers, no timeline for review. The world's largest gold refiner, the nation that processes 40% of global gold supply, the country whose refineries transform raw ore into the bars that stock vaults from London to New York, that country has decided its gold stays home. The $10 trillion question is not whether this matters. The question is whether you understand what just shifted, and how little time remains to position for the consequences. Here's what they're not telling you. China's gold industry operates on a scale that most Western analysts dramatically underestimate. The nation hosts 14 of the world's 67 LBMA-accredited refineries. These facilities process not just domestically mined gold, approximately 370 tons annually, but imported ore, scrap, and doré from operations across Africa, South America, and Central Asia. Total Chinese refining capacity exceeds 2,400 tons annually. Approximately 800 tons of that output has historically been exported to Switzerland for further processing, to London for LBMA market delivery, to Singapore and Dubai for regional distribution. 800 tons. At current prices, roughly $68 billion in annual gold flow. That flow stopped this morning. The mechanism of the ban is comprehensive. Directive 2026-14 doesn't merely restrict refined gold exports. It prohibits export of gold in any form: bullion, semi-finished products, jewelry components, industrial materials. The only exception, finished consumer jewelry in quantities below 500 grams, accompanied by individual export permits requiring 30-day advance application. The directive applies retroactively to shipments in transit. Gold that left Chinese ports but hasn't cleared foreign customs is being recalled. Shipping manifests are being amended. Containers are being rerouted. At 4:30 p.m. Hong Kong time, Maritime Tracking Services identified 14 cargo vessels carrying gold shipments from Chinese ports that received instructions to return to origin. The combined cargo, approximately 47 tons of refined gold that will never reach its intended destinations. The Western refiners who depend on Chinese processing capacity discovered the ban when their shipments were blocked. No advance warning, no consultation, no negotiation period. One morning, gold flowed freely. The next morning, it didn't. The official explanation, released through state media at 10 a.m. Beijing time, references strategic resource management and domestic market stability requirements. The phrases are bureaucratic camouflage. The meaning is power. China looked at the global gold market, the LBMA settlement failures, the Shanghai inventory depletion, the paper physical divergence spreading across every major exchange, and made a calculation. The gold inside Chinese borders is more valuable as leverage than as export revenue. This is where the lie becomes unsustainable. For 30 years, the global gold supply chain operated on an assumption. China would continue refining and exporting gold because China benefited from the revenue, the employment, the industrial development that gold processing provided. The assumption treated China as a participant in a Western-designed system, a supplier serving global demand, motivated by commercial interest to keep product flowing. The assumption was wrong. China was never merely a participant. China was building leverage. The refining capacity that Western markets came to depend upon was strategic infrastructure, developed precisely because dependency creates power. That power is now being exercised. The paper versus physical distinction takes on new dimensions when the physical supply is embargoed. Western gold markets trade paper claims, futures contracts, ETF shares, unallocated accounts, against a float of physical metal that circulates through vaults and refineries. That float requires constant replenishment. Mining adds new supply. Scrap recycling returns metal to circulation. Refinery output transforms raw material into deliverable bars. Remove Chinese refining from the equation, and the replenishment mechanism breaks, not partially, catastrophically. LBMA good delivery standards require bars refined by accredited facilities. Chinese refineries produce approximately 35% of global good delivery output. Without that production, the pipeline of new deliverable bars shrinks by more than a third, permanently, for as long as the ban remains in effect. But the ban's impact extends beyond volume reduction. Chinese refineries process ore from dozens of mines that lack alternative processing arrangements. Gold mined in Ghana, Tanzania, Indonesia, and Peru flows to Chinese facilities because those facilities offer the best combination of capacity, cost, and reliability. Those mines now have gold they cannot sell. Or rather, gold they cannot sell to Western markets. China has offered, through diplomatic channels communicated within hours of the ban's announcement, to purchase mine output directly for domestic consumption at prices equal to or exceeding Western benchmarks. The gold that was destined for LBMA vaults will instead enter Chinese reserves. The supply loss for Western markets doubles. They lose Chinese refinery output plus the foreign ore that Chinese refineries processed. At 11:15 a.m. Eastern this morning, the LBMA issued an emergency notice to member banks. Forward supply projections require immediate revision due to material change in refinery availability. Members should assess delivery obligations against adjusted capacity forecasts. Translation: the gold you promised to deliver may not exist. Plan accordingly. When institutions do what they're doing now, they're not managing risk. They're confronting a world that just changed fundamentally. Within 3 hours of the ban's announcement, gold futures on COMEX rose $187 per ounce, a 6.2% single-session move that triggered circuit breakers twice and suspended trading for 47 minutes total. The spot price increase understates the physical market response. In London, dealers reported no offers for immediate delivery by mid-afternoon. The market didn't just become expensive, it became empty. Sellers who held physical inventory refused to sell, waiting to see how high premiums would climb. The first post-ban physical transaction, recorded by LBMA Clearing, occurred at 4:47 p.m. London time, 400 ounces at $3,890 per ounce, a 23% premium over the suspended futures price. The buyer was a European central bank executing through a primary dealer. The seller was a private Swiss vault liquidating client holdings at the client's instruction. 23% premium for a central bank. On the same day the ban was announced. By market close in New York, the premium for physical delivery had widened to 31%. Dealers who would quote at all demanded $4,140 per ounce for gold available within 48 hours. The futures price, when trading resumed, showed $3,156, a number increasingly disconnected from any transaction involving actual metal. The divergence that began with LBMA settlement failures and accelerated through Shanghai's inventory depletion has now ruptured entirely. Paper gold and physical gold are no longer the same market. They're not even the same asset class. Paper gold is a financial instrument, a bet on price direction, a hedging tool, a speculative vehicle. Physical gold is a strategic resource, newly scarce, subject to export controls and state intervention. The correlation between their prices will become increasingly unreliable as the ban's duration extends. Less than 72 hours remain before the first major delivery deadline tests the new supply reality. February 1st brings the monthly COMEX futures expiration, with approximately 23,000 contracts standing for physical delivery, 7.2 million ounces of gold that holders expect to receive in metal, not cash. COMEX registered inventory currently totals 13.8 million ounces, sufficient, theoretically, to meet delivery obligations. But that inventory was already declining before the China ban, and the entities holding registered inventory, bullion banks, dealers, institutional investors, now face dramatically altered incentives. Why deliver gold into a market where replacement supply has been embargoed? Why surrender metal that will be worth substantially more next week than today? The rational response to supply shock is to withhold supply, waiting for prices that reflect the new scarcity. If holders withhold, COMEX faces the same settlement failures that crippled the LBMA. The exchange can force delivery through contract terms, but forced delivery destroys the trust that makes futures markets function. Participants who feel coerced don't return. Liquidity evaporates. The countdown to February 1st is the first test. More tests follow. Every futures expiration, every ETF redemption, every unallocated account conversion becomes a stress event in a market where stress is now the baseline condition. While one side scrambles, the other side consolidates. The timing of Directive 2026-14 was not arbitrary. It arrived precisely as Western gold markets demonstrated they could not reliably deliver physical metal. China watched the LBMA failures. China watched its own SGE vaults deplete as holders rushed to withdraw. China calculated that the paper structures supporting Western gold markets were entering terminal dysfunction, and chose this moment to accelerate that dysfunction while securing its own position. The directive serves multiple strategic objectives simultaneously. First, it ensures domestic supply. Chinese citizens and institutions, facing currency uncertainty, property market instability, and geopolitical tension, have been accumulating gold at record rates. The ban guarantees that domestic demand is met before any gold reaches foreign markets. Second, it creates leverage in bilateral negotiations. China now controls a resource that Western central banks desperately need. Future gold flows can be tied to diplomatic concessions, trade agreements, or security arrangements. The gold becomes a bargaining chip worth tens of billions annually. Third, it accelerates de-dollarization. The BRICS settlement mechanism, designed to enable non-dollar trade settlement, includes gold-backed instruments. Chinese gold exports could support that system rather than Western markets. The ban redirects supply toward infrastructure designed to replace dollar hegemony. Fourth, it exposes Western vulnerability. Every day the ban continues, Western institutions scramble more desperately. The scrambling is visible. The dependency is undeniable. The power relationship that was obscured by normal trade becomes explicit through its interruption. At 2 p.m. Beijing time, Foreign Ministry spokesperson delivered a statement that Western media largely ignored amid the market chaos. China's management of strategic resources reflects sovereign decisions about national priorities. We note that certain nations have long employed export controls on technologies critical to China's development. We trust those nations will understand that resource management is a right of all sovereign states. The reference to semiconductor export controls is unmistakable. The West restricted chip technology to slow Chinese advancement. China is restricting gold to demonstrate that restriction is a game two can play. The geopolitical dimension compounds the market impact. This is not merely a supply disruption. It's a statement about the emerging international order, an order where resource control matters more than financial engineering, where physical assets trump paper claims, where the nations that produce commodities exercise power over the nations that consume them. The BRICS nations, representing 46% of global population and 35% of global GDP, released a coordinated statement within 6 hours of the ban. Member states support China's sovereign decision regarding strategic resource management and reaffirm commitment to developing resilient supply chains that reduce dependency on any single market or currency system. The statement is diplomatic language for, "We're together on this. The gold flows to us now, not to you." Russia announced within hours that it would prioritize gold sales to BRICS partners, formalizing an arrangement that has been informal since Western sanctions began. Combined with China's export ban, this removes approximately 1,100 tons of annual production from Western accessible supply, nearly one-third of global mine output. India's gold imports, traditionally sourced through London and Dubai, will increasingly flow through Shanghai and Moscow. The supply chains are already being restructured. Letters of intent have been signed. The infrastructure for bypassing Western markets exists and is expanding. This is what a system looks like when it runs out of time. The Western gold market, paper-heavy, leverage-dependent, physically constrained, now faces a supply shock it has no mechanism to absorb. New mining supply cannot fill the gap. Opening new mines requires 7 to 10 years from discovery to production. Expanding existing operations requires 2 to 3 years and billions in capital. The supply that disappeared this morning cannot be replaced this decade. Recycling could theoretically increase, but scrap supply responds to price with significant lag. The jewelry and electronics that might be recycled are distributed across billions of individual owners, most of whom don't monitor gold prices or participate in scrap markets. Mobilizing that supply requires years of elevated prices changing behavior. The only rapid supply source is existing holdings, gold already refined, already in vaults, owned by entities who might be induced to sell. But the ban changes the psychology of holding. When supply becomes scarce, holders become more reluctant to sell. The premium that might attract selling at 10% fails to attract selling at 30%. Each holder waits for someone else to sell first. The trap has no exit that doesn't involve dramatically higher prices. And dramatically higher, in a market where 31% premiums appeared within hours of the ban, could mean levels that seem inconceivable against historical benchmarks. The $10 trillion power shift is not metaphor, it's arithmetic. Global gold holdings, central bank reserves, institutional positions, private ownership, total approximately $15 trillion at pre-ban prices. A 30% price increase adds $4.5 trillion in value. A 50% increase adds $7.5 trillion. A doubling, not impossible if the ban persists and Western markets truly break, adds $15 trillion. That value transfers from those who don't hold gold to those who do, from paper holders to physical holders, from Western institutions with leveraged exposure to Eastern institutions with allocated metal, from consumers whose currencies debase to savers who preserved purchasing power. The $10 trillion is the minimum. It assumes moderate price adjustment and continued market function. If function truly breaks, if paper gold becomes worthless while physical gold reprices to scarcity, the transfer is larger still. China holds an estimated 5,000 to 8,000 tons of gold, far exceeding official figures. Russia holds 2,350 tons officially, likely more through non-reported channels. The BRICS nations collectively may hold 15,000 to 20,000 tons, a position that appreciates by hundreds of billions of dollars for every $100 increase in gold price. They created the conditions for that appreciation. The export ban isn't defensive, it's offensive. It's the exercise of strategic advantage accumulated over decades of patient positioning. The question is not whether the power shift occurs. It's occurring in real time, visible in price moves and premium spreads and diplomatic statements. The question is who understands the shift while response is still possible. Those who hold physical gold, in their own custody, outside exchange systems, free from counterparty risk, will participate in the appreciation that the ban ensures. Their wealth increases in purchasing power terms, even as nominal prices become difficult to quote. Those who hold paper gold, ETF shares, futures contracts, unallocated accounts, will discover that their claims may not convert to metal. The exchanges that cannot deliver will settle in cash at prices that may be far below physical market value. The wealth transfer from paper to physical will be explicit and painful. Those who hold no gold, who remained in cash or bonds or equities, skeptical of metal's relevance in a digital age, will watch their purchasing power erode as currencies adjust to a world where strategic resources command premiums that financial assets cannot match. The informed are not waiting for clarity. Since this morning's announcement, physical gold purchases at dealers outside China have increased by an amount that dealers describe as overwhelming. Order queues that normally clear in hours now extend days. Inventory that existed at market open has been sold. Replacement inventory is not available at previous prices. Private vault storage requests in Switzerland, Singapore, and New Zealand have exceeded monthly averages within the first 12 hours of the ban. The infrastructure for holding physical gold outside institutional systems is saturating. The migration from paper to physical, underway for months, is now a stampede. The ban didn't create the migration, it accelerated it beyond any previous pace. Reality asserts itself through actions that cannot be reversed. China's export ban is not a threat or a negotiating position. It's implemented policy, enforced at every port, applied retroactively to shipments in transit. The gold inside China stays inside China. That reality is established and will persist until Beijing decides otherwise. The decision to lift the ban will not come from Western pressure or market chaos. It will come when China determines that lifting serves Chinese interests that may include trade concessions, technology access, diplomatic recognition, or simply the passage of enough time that Western dependency becomes permanent. Those interests may take months to satisfy. They may take years. The ban's duration is not a market variable subject to analysis. It's a political decision, controlled by actors whose objectives extend far beyond commodity prices. The appropriate response to uncertainty of indefinite duration is not to wait for resolution. It's to position for multiple scenarios, weighting probability toward the one that current evidence suggests. The ban persists, supplies tighten, paper-physical divergence widens, and gold prices in all currencies rise substantially. That scenario is not prediction. It's the mechanical consequence of the supply-demand imbalance the ban creates. Remove 800 to 1,100 tons of annual supply from a market already in deficit. The price adjusts. The only question is magnitude. The $10 trillion power shift names the magnitude. The transfer is underway. The positions are being taken. On one side, nations and individuals holding physical gold, watching their wealth appreciate in real terms, their strategic position strengthen, their independence from paper systems increase. On the other side, institutions and individuals holding paper claims, discovering those claims cannot be honored, their exposure to counterparty risk materializing, their assumptions about market function proving false. The line between these sides is not geographic or political, it's a line of understanding. Those who understood paper physical divergence positioned accordingly. Those who didn't will learn the lesson expensively. China drew the line this morning. The customs form stamped "denied" marks the boundary between the old world and the new. The old world assumed cooperation. The new world assumes competition. The old world priced gold as a commodity. The new world prices gold as a strategic weapon. The old world relied on paper. The new world demands physical. The transition between worlds doesn't wait for permission. It proceeds through embargo, through premium, through vault depletion and delivery failure. It proceeds this morning, this afternoon, tonight, and every day until the paper structures that cannot deliver collapse under their own contradictions. The $10 trillion is moving. The question is only which side of the movement you occupy, and whether you understood the shift before it was complete. The customs form says, "denied." The market says the rest. Listen to what the market is telling you. The window for listening is measured in days, not months. After that, the listening becomes watching. Watching a transfer you could have participated in but chose to observe instead. The choice is still available. The gold still exists. The dealers still quote, at premiums that would have seemed absurd a week ago but seem reasonable against what's coming. The form says, "denied." Everything else follows from those two characters, including perhaps your response to reading them.